So I'm Tammy Goen, and I'm a highly sensing person myself and a high sensory coach. And I've been working with high sensitivity for 6, 8, 9 years now, I think. Became aware of it about 12 years ago, maybe, and started looking at that as my primary clientele, if you will, as a coach, primarily because the people that were finding me, it turned out, were very highly sensing as well, even though they weren't necessarily aware of it. They're like, oh, this kind of sounds like me, but I don't know. But also I was hearing that people had counseling or coaching in the past and felt like they could only get so far because they weren't really quite understood, and the support they were looking for wasn't fully there, because of that. So that became my niche, because I do understand that. I do have a background as a counselor. I did that first, got burned out because I didn't understand about high sensitivity at that point. When I graduated my program was when Elaine Aaron, the primary researcher, was doing all of her research, so I wasn't aware of it at all at that time. So didn't quite set things up quite the right way, and I worked with a lot of intense clients and situations. So I just hit burnout one time and said, I can't do this anymore, and took a little different turn for a while, and then came back through coaching. And this has really been, it's definitely my love, because I get it, and I just understand it a lot more. So with that, I do want to be totally transparent. I do not have children. So I'm not going to stand up here and say, this is, do it this way, or I totally understand all that. I have a background in a lot of education and training in parenting, a variety of different ways. I've worked with a lot of kids when I was a counselor. I totally understand the high sensitivity thing in general. So all of that incorporated, but I don't pretend to understand what that's like, in the heat of things. So if you have specific questions and I can't talk to them, I'll be upfront with that. But I can also tell you from, obviously I was a highly sensing child, and working with children and parents all along, not being aware of the high sensitivity trait, but understanding it looking back now, I have that to bring as well. But so here we are to talk about being a highly sensitive person. And I like to use the term highly sensing, so you'll hear me use that quite a lot, because in our society, at least, the term sensitivity tends to have kind of a negative connotation, or people will say, oh yeah, sensitivity, I know all about that, take care of that, and come back and see me when it's all all done. So I think highly sensing works better because it doesn't have that stigma, but it also tends to encourage people to say, oh wait, what is that? And that's really what it's about. So I can spend a little bit of time, since you're not as familiar, just talking a little bit about what that sensitivity looks like, and then how that impacts just the whole experience of parenting, because parenting is challenging enough. And if you're highly sensing, then things are going to affect you in a different way. So to start with, one of the things that's really primary for high sensitivity in general, highly sensing people can become very overwhelmed. As kind of a broad overview, highly sensing people process information really, really deeply. There are actually different parts of our brains that function a little bit differently, and we process things literally, you can see them on scans and things like that. So we process deeply, and we give a lot of meaning to everything. So we might have heard all our lives, we're too sensitive, but we hold on to stuff, that's not a big deal, why are you still worried about that? Things like that, because we process everything, and we don't have the same filters. It's like being a big sponge without all those filters. So we're taking all of that stuff in. It's almost, like everything is equally as important until we get it all, chosen, okay, I'm going to focus on this and try to let this stuff go. But it's harder for us because everything's important. So as a result of that, we can become overwhelmed a lot more easily. We're constantly having that input come in, and so we have basically two buckets. So if we have a bucket with our own energy, and then we have one of all the stuff that's coming in from the world. And we want that to be pretty balanced, but we end up getting depleted with our own and having this one totally overflowing because that stuff is just coming in constantly. So our nervous system tends to be really amped to start with. So it takes less to overfill, and then we get depleted really easily because we're processing all the time. So it uses up our energy. So that can be very overwhelming, whether that's environmental input, stuff in your family, your emotions, the energy you're picking up, because all of those things are factors for high sensitivity. Being able to just like pick up on all of those things. We're the ones that tend to know things that others don't, recognize stuff, be aware of people's energy and what they need. So all of that stuff's happening in the background, and so it becomes a lot. So as a parent, of course, all of that stuff is happening regardless of what you need to do for your family and your kids, and it can definitely be challenging. So that's one of the things to be just aware of, is that overwhelm response and that sensory overload. So just being aware that that's part of being wired this way, because that is we've from the very beginning, even in the womb, you can tell that infants, fetuses are likely to be highly sensing. So I mean, it's from day one. So it's not because of your environment or things that have happened to you. You are wired that way. So the fact that you get overwhelmed easily or have this sensory overload is just a factor of being more sensitive, and it's normal within our realm. So, but again, with parenting, that can really accumulate more, and then we tend to not take care of ourselves as much. The majority of people that find me, they appear like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to take care of myself, and I've done a little yoga, I've done some meditation, but there's nothing consistent, and it's so much more important for us because of that overload and overwhelm. So those are the things that really can affect us a lot, and then that putting others first, obviously in the family, got to take care of the kids first, got to take care of the the partner, the bigger family, whatever. And then if there happens to be time left over for me, super. But as we know, you put on your oxygen mask so that you can help everybody else, because if you don't do that, then you can only help so long, and that's that. So that's that much more pertinent, but less likely even to happen, because we tend to put other people's first, and we want everything to be just right and everyone to be happy, and then we also tend toward perfectionism, wanting everything to be not just perfect like in the environment, but what we do, what we offer, being the very best parent you can be, being the best employee or boss or whatever it is you're doing, and really having high expectations of ourselves. So all of those things can contribute to making it much more challenging. And then just because we are like a sponge, and we're pulling all of that stuff in, and our attention is focused on so many things at once, it really can drain our energy. So it's like getting to the end of the day and completely running out of bandwidth when everyone's like, oh, let's go for dinner, let's go, do this, or go to a concert. And you thought in the morning that sounded fabulous, and then you get to the end of the day and you're on, there is no way that I am gonna make this work. And so sometimes that can be more challenging with kids who are like in sports, or you have some kind of a travel event or a birthday party or something like that. You just want to go home and crash, and now you have to go take care of your activity for your child or whatever. And that can really be enough to just want to put you over the edge. But of course, you stay there and you do what you're supposed to do, and then you get home and you have nothing left for your partner, or all you want to do is crawl under the covers, and then you wake up in the morning going, oh, I have to do this again. So that self-care is super important, which I'll be talking about later. But we do have the tendency for the self-doubt and judgment anyway, parent or not. And I think that's pretty common for parents anyway, to have their own expectations of what just that perfect parent is going to be. But with all of these other factors, it can be really challenging with, on top of all of that. And then communication. So you're newly aware to high sensitivity based on what the quiz. You have a partner. Mm-hmm. He, she, you think also highly sensing or not? Like, nope, this is not. No, okay. So that's part of the communication, and we can talk about that later, but a little bit more. But that communication piece is really important for first knowing what your own needs are, and then being able to communicate that with someone else and say, hey, I know you want to go and do this and this, and it sounds really, really great. I'm done. So if we can work something out, and maybe you go do that, and I'll do this thing on Saturday, or but have that communication and ask for support rather than just expecting yourself to do it all and not have a problem with it. Like, well, my partner doesn't seem to have an issue. Why am I tanked at this point? And just acknowledging that we just do things differently. So, hi, come on in. So that self time, and I'll talk about it again I have a whole section. I'll talk on self-care because that's just so important. So come on in. And just before I move on, are you familiar with high sensitivity and one of you is highly sensing? Yes, okay. So we don't need to cover that. We were just talking about some of these challenges as a highly sensing parent. Are both of you highly sensing? Okay. Okay, so we were just talking about how having one partner who is and when it isn't creates its own dynamics. And then, not that you guys can't trigger each other or have responses, with kids, and then still have some of those challenges. But it is a little bit different dynamic when you at least come from a similar place. So for you, having the difference there, that communication is that much more important because you'll have someone who does not see things the same way, doesn't experience things the same way. And actually, I always recommend for anyone who's not highly sensing and is in any relationship with someone who is, that book, just providing that, sense that the highly sensitive person book, and say, hey, would you just read this, please? And then they can get a better understanding without having to come from you, and whatever filters are there, just say, here, this is me. It helps them just learn and understand a little bit more. Not that it's not good when you are aware of that too, so you learn things maybe that you didn't even realize, oh, that's part of it too. That's interesting. So, yeah. Okay, so in terms of some of the stuff that's challenging for being a highly sensing parent, whether your children are highly sensing or not, these are some of the things that can really trigger us. And one of those things, and this is makes every time I bring this one up, I think of when I visit my sister and her husband, and then their two kids. And my nephew I have always known, he's now 20, but I always knew he was highly sensing. But one of the things that he did for self-soothing and taking care of himself was he was always making some little noise, repetitive noise. And so when I would be visiting, I would just like tap him on the leg or something. He's like, oh, am I doing that thing? I said, oh, yeah, one of those. He's like, yeah, okay. But those things can just kind of get under our skin sometimes, something that if it's just like the wrong frequency or for some reason is just kind of annoying. And, kids do that. So that's one thing that can just really kind of get on our nerves. So just be aware that that's a very normal experience. And then, any other kind of noises. But also like kids' emotions and their energy. Sometimes let's say you've had a really big day and you really need to decompress, and then your child is just bouncing off the walls or just has so much energy and they want to do this and this and this, and you're going, I just want to crash. So that can be really challenging. And then also just their emotional state. We tend to pick up on everything around us and what people are going through. And you love your child and you want them to be happy. And so if you're picking up that they're struggling with something, that can be really triggering and really challenging to be dealing with, because you're going to sense that even at a deeper level than average. And that can really be definitely challenging. And then sometimes, kids will be kids and they will do things that are not very kind, or in a way that you're thinking, is he not thinking about other people at this point? Or what's going on that just doesn't seem okay? And sometimes it's just recognizing that, okay, I might be more reactive to this than average. So maybe I can step back, take a breather, come back. Or there are things like, of course, creating boundaries and rules and all those kinds of things and making sure that you follow through with them. But again, these are some things just to be aware of, that you're going to be reacting to these things more quickly than average. And that's normal because, again, we're like, I was talking earlier about being like a sponge without all the filters. So you bring in all that stuff in And so when you get overloaded, it's really hard to manage a lot of this stuff. And kids tend to be very active, and that can be challenging when there's just stuff going on constantly. And you think, can we just be quiet for a little while? So one of the things I always recommend with families is orchestrating that. So saying, like, after dinner every night, you can call it sometimes quiet time. You can use that if everyone likes that. You know, if you have a highly sensing child, they might like that. Otherwise, it might like, why do I have to be quiet, or why do I, you know? But if you think about it as something like it's me time, or it's what, you know, pick something that will be welcomed as like this is a fun time where we each get to go in a separate part of the house, and we get to have our 30 minutes to do our thing. You know, so you can read, you can color, you can play a game if that's allowed, you can watch a program if that's allowed, you know, whatever it is, but just having that space for you and the kids, because it's good even for non-highly sensing kids to have downtime. There's so much going on in the world, and every day just constantly going. So that's important. Then I talked about, you know, kids' energy and their feelings. Defiance can be really, really challenging. It's easy to take offense or take things personally, and even more so for us. So recognizing that, you know, again, kids will be kids. They're going to push those buttons, and it's remembering that it's not personal. And a lot of this stuff is just standard parenting type stuff, but it just becomes more important to be aware of if you're highly sensing, or, you know, your triggers happen much sooner. You can have that bandwidth just completely gone, and then it's harder to tolerate all of these things. So just being aware, okay, yeah, some people might be able to last 2 hours extra, and I just can't, and being able to orchestrate things so that works. And then sometimes when we have, say you want to, create your schedule, make everything just right, and then your child doesn't cooperate with that. They're like, no, I don't want to do that. And you're thinking, I had this all set up so that when he was doing that, I could have a little bit of downtime. I could, whatever. Just be able to chill out, and not interested. And now we need to do something different. So being able to revamp. And one of the things that can be challenging for highly sensing folks is to not have adequate preparation, or not notice, not have something scheduled in. Surprises, that kind of stuff can be a lot more challenging. So again, those are just things to really be aware of. Then it's also really good to recognize what you bring to the table as a highly sensing parent. Because these things tend to be downplayed, or we don't recognize what a good job we're doing. And I say as I mentioned earlier when you were here, I'm actually not a parent, but I have a lot of training in parenting in a variety of ways. Of course, I'm highly sensing. I've worked with a lot of children, but I don't have that direct connection. But, all right, lost my train of thought. It's really easy as highly sensing people to not realize the skills that we bring, and that a lot of the things that are working are as a result of our sensitivity. So in general, the things that people really like about us, that they depend on us for, that they think we're amazing with, often have to do with our level of sensitivity. But they're not really on the radar, because it's like not the squeaky wheel. It's not the stuff that they think should be different because it's different from them. But they appreciate those things. And so there's a lot of those things that you're doing really great because of your sensitivity as a parent, but it's easy to lose sight of those things because it's other stuff that sticks out. So just being able to remember that your compassion and your kindness and your ability to connect with and touch in with what your kids are needing, what your partner needs, all of those things, it is really at a deeper level than typical. I mean, it feels normal to you, but compared to someone else who's not highly sensing, it's probably at a much deeper level, and it really is impactful, and it really does help the whole family. So being just aware of that and honoring that, celebrating it, is a really great thing. And the ability to put ourselves in others' shoes is really valuable as a parent, because of course you've been a child and you know what it's like to be a child, but you're not anymore. But you are highly sensing, so that much more you can put yourself in that place and say, oh, okay, what would that be like? Yeah, I can feel that frustration, or I can feel that disappointment, or I understand where that would come from. So that really does help with, you know, your parenting abilities and those skills that you bring that your kids are going to appreciate, even if not consciously, and they may not actually tell you. So we tend to be really good listeners, so that can really be, you know, impactful as a parent. And modeling that helps kids learn how to be better listeners, or develop, you know, that skill of being good listeners. So that's really, really helpful. And it's easy to forget that, again, because it's just natural for you. You know how to listen. But it can just be downplayed quite a lot. We tend to get things done, be prepared, make sure everything's all just the way it needs to be so that it works out, rather than just winging it and being like, oh, well, I guess we'll have to figure this out. But we usually are the ones that have all of the contingencies mapped out ahead of time and go, okay, well, if this happens, and so, you know, if someone gets cold, oh, well, here's some gloves. If someone needs this, like, here's your snack. Don't worry about it, you know. So that's a major skill for anyone, but especially for parents, right? I mean, you have all these unexpected things happen, but you've been able to actually say, well, I kind of thought maybe something like this could happen, or, you know, something unexpected, so I'm prepared. So thinking ahead. So, and then the gatekeepers idea, usually highly sensing people are thought of as like the canaries in the coal mine, because we do pick up on subtleties and things that people miss, whether that's energy or people's emotions, or just you are working with someone and you just know this person needs this. And so that's really effective when you could say, with the words, you know, my son's not saying I need this, but I know this is what he needs. Even if he doesn't think so, let's, you know, provide that. And so you're really probably good at picking up on those things, knowing what's going to help. So one of the things in terms of just honoring and celebrating that you have these skills is making sure that you listen to those things. So when you get a hit that your child needs something and no one else seems to recognize that, just know that you're probably right on. You probably have that good sense to recognize that and just go with that, even if your partner is going like, oh, he doesn't need a nap, you know, and you think, no, that's really what he needs right now. And just going with that. And that's part of that communication, just saying, I know sometimes it doesn't seem like that's what's going on, but I can pick up on these things, and I'm pretty sure, you know, that's what we need to do right now. So again, just recognizing those things, you know, whether you're reading about high sensitivity or you're just considering you're having a really frustrating day and you say, okay, am I a good parent? Am I a lousy parent? Just remind yourself of all of the things, all these skills that you have, and all the stuff that kind of gets overshadowed when there's a squeaky wheel of something. And just remember, oh yeah, I have a lot that I offer, a lot that I bring. I am a good parent. And these are some of the reasons. Okay, so I've talked about this, alluded to this, but again, the oxygen mask idea. If we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of everybody else. I mean, that's for everyone. But if you're a parent and you don't take care of yourself, for one, you're going to crash because you're going to lose your bandwidth, run out of energy before whatever might be average. But you're also modeling that for your children. So if you are taking care of yourself and you're in charge of your emotions and your energy, and you acknowledge when, like, oh, you know what? Mom's having a rough day today. I'm, you know, really kind of worn out, and I need a nap, or I need 30 minutes to just not do anything, and then afterwards, I'm here for you. And they see that happening, then it models it for them, for their own choices, like, oh, you can take time out and, you know, just do nothing or take a break or whatever, and that's okay because my parent's doing it. But it also helps to then be more available to your kids later. So prioritizing it, again, if you wait until the end, like if I have time left today, I'll do a 10-minute meditation. Probably not gonna happen because well, yeah, I could do that, but I should get ready for this tomorrow, and then I have to do this, and he wants to do this, and someone just called for, you know. So if it's not prioritized and looked at as equally important, if not more so than any other to-dos on your list that day, that it has to happen like every single day, then you will end up with that place of, just crashing and wanting to just go away from the world and not knowing how you're going to manage 3 more hours, parenting, because you really just want to go to bed. So doing that, scheduling it in, trying to create, and this is the biggest challenge I know working with parents, trying to figure out where that can fit in so that it can be consistent every single day. And the deal is to be able to find a rhythm, and not necessarily clock time, because things will change all the time, but like in a routine where, okay, well, when my child or children are getting ready for school, or when they're napping, or when they're, whatever it is that they're doing, I have this 20-minute period most of the time after breakfast and brushing teeth, or after whatever, but kind of like in a sequence of events, and saying, okay, this is the time that I get to go for 10 minutes. And sometimes it means going into the bathroom and locking the door. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can have your bedroom, or you can have another room in the house where, okay, I'm having my quiet time or my me time or whatever, and nobody's allowed to interfere, or interrupt you. 10 minutes, you can set an alarm or a clock outside somewhere that everyone knows, 2 more minutes until we can bug mom or bug dad. But something like that can be consistent. So if you have that every single day, even if it is only 10 minutes or 5 minutes, but every single day, that becomes a habit, and your body is able to at least have that time to let go, regroup. You can, shut out everything that's going on and take care of you. And then everyone else sees that that's important, valuable, and that you value yourself enough for that. And it helps, building respect. So boundaries are one of the big things for anybody, especially for highly sensing people, and then for highly sensing parents. It's very important to try to let go of the need to just give in and make things, we like things to flow and just be smooth and everyone to be happy. So a lot of times that means, I said this, but it's easier to just do this, or I'm not going to follow through with that. I'll worry about it tomorrow because it's just, too much. But we do that, and of course it reinforces behaviors that we don't want, but it's also not honoring you. If you say, nope, we're not going to do it this way, and I know that bothers you, and you know that there's going to be some backlash, and be prepared for that, and then maybe go and take 5 minutes to let go of that, to strip that off, whatever, but then stick with it and come back and say, yep, this is the way it needs to be. And sometimes that's just being honest with what you need and sharing that with your child. You know what? Mom right now needs 10 minutes to be quiet so that I can be there for you after that 10 minutes. And that's just the way it's going to be. But I want to, watch the movie or whatever. It's like, yep, we're going to do that in 10 minutes. And you do that consistently, and then they learn, he's serious about that. He wants his downtime. I need to make that happen, I guess. And not that there won't be pushing, but the more you do that, the more they'll get used to that. And yeah, there'll be those days and they're like, yeah, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to push. And so if you have that help and support from your partner to say, okay, this is something I really need to do. Tag, you're it, because I need to do this. And make that visible, not like a secret thing, like, okay, you do this because I have to go and be quiet for 10 minutes, but totally out in the open so that they see that process and see that it's valuable and that you're honoring yourself and taking care of yourself. I think it was before you guys came in, but maybe not, where we talked about like each person having a certain time, like after dinner. Were you here when I was talking about that? All right. Oh, okay. So that's one of the ways to make sure that you have that, me time, is to do it as a family. So you can, like right after dinner, everyone has a 30-minute of whatever you call that. It's me time, yay, everyone gets to, and everyone has their own little place or something, sitting quietly at the table while someone's doing something over here or whatever, but an understanding that no one engages. It's all separate, even though you're all in the same house. Maybe you're in different rooms, maybe not, but it's just known as that me time, which is important for everyone, kids and parents. Everyone has that together. So that's one way of making it happen, is if everybody does it rather than trying to fit it in here or there, depending on what everybody else is doing. So Modeling. So the other thing with that authenticity of saying, I need this, this is what we're going to do, and modeling this, the good self-care is also that idea of allowing for mistakes and not making those secret either. So being able to say, oh, that's not the way I planned for that. Oops, okay, I'll do that different next time. And allowing that not only for your kids to see that, but for you to acknowledge that yourself. Yes, it's okay to make mistakes because we can be very perfectionistic. And if we're saying, I gotta be a perfect parent and I can't screw up, I can't let my kids see me screw up, because then they'll not have this squeaky clean idea of me. But being real creates much more respect and honest engagement, and being able to allow yourself that can be a bit of a challenge for us, but really, really important. Okay. So some stuff in case I didn't talk about them. Specific ideas, again, scheduling it in, but things like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, anything where basically, it's good to have things like active, working out, exercise type stuff, anything that's good for you, eating well, all of that kind of stuff is part of self-care. But it's also really important to have the things like meditation or breathing or yoga, journaling, something like that, where you are like out of the greater world, out of your head, and just in the present moment. So whatever you can find that allows you to be just quiet, go within if you can, even if that's 5 or 10 minutes, great. Having that time to just be in the moment, because as long as we're focused on the past and what's already happened, or we're worried about the future, we're not in the moment, and then our systems kick into that fight or flight mode, and then we're sucking up all that energy, we're losing all our bandwidth, and we're going to be exhausted. So finding those things that really allow you to be quiet, and then allow you to be in the flow. So if you are into sports or dancing or some kind of activity that allows you to have the world go away for 15 minutes, half hour, or whatever. I don't know if maybe you and your partner have Tuesday nights I get to do this, and maybe Wednesday nights is for my partner, and they get to, each person has an opportunity to do something that they really are passionate about, that they really get into that. And if you can be really in that flow state, even though you're doing something actively, then you're still able to access that inner part of you that needs to be recharged and let go of everything and calm, or it's more recharging, but in that calm, resonant way, instead of going out and seeing how fast you can run your half marathon or whatever. That's really great too, but unless that puts you in your flow state, so then that's great. Reading, journaling, creating, being in nature. Highly sensing people tend to be very creative, and sometimes people are like, well, I'm not an artist, so it doesn't have to be creating artistic things, although if we can let go of our expectations and just play with it, free form, like drawing with your non-dominant hand, or doing, taking a class that's something that you've never done before, so you have no expectations because you're not supposed to be good at it, you've never done it. But something that's creative, and that might be cooking or something else for you, whatever is creative. But allowing for that creativity to come out, for that side of you to be recognized. Thanks for coming. Another thing that's really, really helpful is podcasts, books, shows, music, anything that lifts you up and helps you take that breath, kind of regroup, reconvene, can be very, very helpful. And then sometimes people are able to work in something like a massage or just a hot bath at home. And again, having those rules like, okay, and maybe you have like a piece of paper that you put on the outside of the door, just as a reminder to anybody that wants to, you say, okay, I'm getting my bath, maybe once a week you have a special bath night and you go in and you can have candles and whatever, and your partner's taking care of the kids. And then maybe you put up that paper on the door that says, 30 minutes, no entrance, no knocking, whatever, so you don't have all that like, Mom, or whatever, on the door when you're trying to lay there and relax. So having those expectations very clear and just making that time for yourself. So Any other ideas? Walking in nature is really great. We tend to be really connected with nature. Is there anything else that you typically do for yourself that works really well?
I lean towards meditation, yoga, that's sort of my thing. I have to get up at 5 in the morning. So it doesn't always have
To be able to do it?
To be able to do it,
right.
Because my son usually gets up at like 5:45, 6, so I have to get up even earlier. But
right.
I know that if I don't start my day with some alone time, I don't know, I feel it.
Absolutely.
So even if he does get up, and I haven't had that time, I will ask for the time to like just sit and journal and meditate for a little bit.
That's great. Yeah.
And I know that I feel different. So.
Yeah, and you probably, if you've been doing it long enough, you know that if something does get in your way and you end up without it, it's like being naked or something. You just like, oh, I'm just really off. There's something missing. Oh, because I didn't get my meditation or I didn't get my me time or whatever. You're traveling and you don't have that extra time and you're hustling off to the airport or whatever, and you're like, wow, I really miss my meditation. So that's great that you're real consistent with it, because that definitely helps. And when we don't get that, even if it's something regular and we can't work that in, sometime during that day we tend to just be like, why is this so challenging, or why do I seem like my energy is just like, oh, because I didn't fit that in today, or I didn't get to do that, so whatever that thing is, self-care thing. Okay, so kind of back with that idea of recognizing the good things that you do, and that a lot of that has to do with high sensitivity. And the reason it's good to recognize that is just so that we don't get down on ourselves about, it's like, oh, why do I have to be so sensitive? And all of these things come up. And it's like, yes, but all of these things are also here. And those would be sorely missed by your partner, your kids, your coworkers, whoever it is. They're not aware of it necessarily because all of that stuff is flowing, but just recognizing that. And so as a parent, being able to tell yourself things like, I'm doing the best I can, and I'm sensitive for a reason, and sensitivity in general is here for a reason. And yes, I'm a parent and I'm sensitive, and I'm going to have different expectations, different experiences. That's just the way it's going to be, and that's okay. Experience is unique. Taking care of me helps me take care of others. Anything that you can remind yourself about, especially, this is the way I'm wired. Yes, this is challenging for me right now, and maybe it seems like with my partner that's not happening. That's just the way it is. And then back when we were talking about boundaries, no is a complete sentence, and sometimes we just need to say that. Especially, this can be really challenging, especially with kids. I mean, your partner could be like this too, but if you had planned something for the end of the day or the weekend and it gets there and you just can't do it. I mean, you could push yourself through, but it's not going to turn out well. You're going to be grumpy or whatever, and you just say, we need to change that. We're going to do that tomorrow or something like that. And the kids are not going to be necessarily happy about that. So being prepared for that, but saying, I know sometimes we don't get to do what we want, and I know you get tired of hearing that, and sometimes we have to change our minds because things don't work out the way we think, or we feel different when we get there. And I'm sorry, but in order for me to be not a grumpy mom, this is what we need to do. So we'll try to do that next time or tomorrow or whatever. But being able to say no and deal with, that's one of the things too, with all parents, kids will have those times, I hate you, and you're not a good mom, dad, whatever, and no one likes to hear that. But highly sensing people in particular have a really hard time with that because we want to be perfect and the perfect parent and the perfect whatever and not have anyone upset with us. That's a big thing. So just going, yep, that's the way it's going to be, and I'm prepared. I'm going to say no, and I might get some backlash on that. I'm going to be prepared for that and not try my best to not take it personally. Okay. So that's just information about me, which is kind of in a weird position compared to my slide. But so obviously we have a very small group, but I wanted to open things up to questions about anything that's come up. As a parent, especially if you're not quite as, it's like, well, it kind of sounds like me, I don't know, but Oh.
So I've heard about it from that perspective. I don't think my son is, but I guess I'm wondering, just for my own understanding, does it relate to anxiety? Does it relate to, I know you said that kids are just born that way, kind of born that way, but is that also, could some of these things also be related to experiences that they had growing up, like anxious parents, or, the same thing that could cause some of these reactions too?
Yeah. So really good questions, because I have heard from people, it's like, oh yeah, I'm really highly sensitive because I had so much trauma. And the reality is, it definitely exacerbates our experience, but high sensitivity itself doesn't happen due to those experiences in childhood. But because we are like sponges, we take all that stuff in, we process it, we give it all this meaning, we tend to react to those types of experiences, traumatic experiences, difficult times, more intensely. So it can really make things more, someone who's highly sensing is going to have a likely much stronger reaction to that trauma or to that bad experience or whatever than someone who's not highly sensing. They do start either they're highly sensing or they're not. Not that people going through trauma can't develop sensitivities about things or triggers and things like that, but in terms of high sensitivity, it's there from the get-go. Things can definitely be more challenging or get exacerbated. And yes, anxiety, depression tends to be higher percentage of experience than average. And actually, there's a higher percentage of highly sensing people that seek out help, like counseling, coaching, go to the doctor and say, oh, I guess I need medication, or something like that, because it's a lot. Life is a lot for us and can be. And if we don't have those right coping strategies because of what was happening in our childhood or some other experiences that we had, then that is more difficult. And sometimes, we can turn to substances and habits that are not healthy and, patterns that just aren't helping at all as a coping strategy, or sometimes numbing out. It's like this is all so intense, I just can't handle it, and you just want to stop feeling. So that can be a lot, more, stronger potential for those that are highly sensing. Now, in general, it doesn't mean that you have to have a negative upbringing for kids to develop anxiety or other, emotional responses to things. Just again, because so much is coming in and it's so big, and sometimes that's just really challenging, and so it can, we can become anxious. So that there's a higher likelihood of developing that anxiety. And a lot of times people, like when I start working with folks, sometimes they're on medication for anxiety, and then they're able to wean off of that because they have these coping strategies now, and they have a different mindset, and they see things differently, and they shift things in their lives, and then suddenly it's like, oh, I meditate every day now, and I do all these things, and I'm not as anxious anymore, and they back off of the medication, but it does tend to be a more common experience just because of that. So, there's reasons for all kids and adults that end up having anxiety, but it can definitely lead to that. I think there was another piece of your question that I wasn't answering, but now I've forgotten. Is that it? Yeah. Okay.
Tammy,
Yeah.
when you did the presentation on so you're highly sensing, you talked a little bit about high sensitivity as a biological trait among different species and sort of.
Uh-huh.
Could you remind me how frequent that is? I think you had some statistics about.
Yeah. Well, so in human population, 20 to 30%. Of the population. They used to say 15 to 20, but now all of the recent research shows no, it's a little higher, 20 to 30%. But they also find that same thing in at least 100 animal species that they've researched. And same thing. And if you think about quail, there's always one that's checking everything out for everybody else and sends out the warning signal and all of that. It happens in a lot of different animal species because that we're the ones that we are the gatekeepers, the safety mechanisms. We're going to tell everybody when something's off. You walk into a room and go, something's not right here, something's off, and then we don't just go, oh. Usually we're just no, I've got to figure out what that is. And so you're searching, and then maybe it's a fire related thing, or maybe it's something that needs to be taken care of, and no one else apparently is aware of that. Of course, 1 in 5, 1 in 4, it's gonna be more than just you, but they might not be saying anything. But anyway, we're the ones that are aware of that kind of stuff. So same thing with the animal population. There are those that they sound the alarm first. They know how to herd everybody up and make sure everything's going in the direction everything's supposed to be going. All of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's not just humans, and it's actually a lot more. I mean, if you think about it, 20 to 30%. It's not a small number.
Validating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you grew up kind of being like, oh, I'm like the sensitive one, as if it's a very
Exactly.
it's a very isolated spot.
Yes.
To be in, and then it's like, oh, actually, 1 in 4, 1 in 5. That's
Right.
That's a decent amount of people.
But since it's not the majority, if you will, it's not average. It's not seen as like, oh, you're this or this, and everyone talks about that. It's still kind of like, oh, that doesn't resonate and that doesn't resonate, but everyone else seems to think that's fine. So what's with me?
Right.
And people don't share that with other people usually until they find out about the trait. I'm like, if I'd only known. And then you can start talking to people, and then you can start creating your little inner circle of other highly sensing people, because you get each other and you don't have to explain, and you get to share various things that the other person's going to go, oh yeah, I've had that exact same thing, or I totally get that, or I can see that completely, where somebody else would be rolling their eyes or saying whatever. So yeah, it's much more prevalent. It's more on the radar than it ever has been, but it's still not the mainstream. I mean, every time I do a networking event or something, and I say something about high sensitivity, and there's going to be somebody saying, what is that?
Yeah.
Or I've never heard of that. What do you mean highly sensitive? What does that mean? So it's really not out there as much, but it's increasing, and there's slowly an increase in the number of therapists, coaches, mental health professionals that are aware of it and able to, having that background, if either they're highly sensitive themselves or they at least have that background. Although I talk with people still who have come right out of grad school recently, and very, very rarely is anyone talking about it still. It's not part of the programs, and no, it's not a diagnosis, so it's not in there. But it's also not part of programs of. I mean, there's probably going to be some kind of mention of sensory processing disorder, because that's in the DSM, and that is an actual thing that people will say, well, let's try to deal with. I mean, not so much that one to totally eradicate it, because they recognize that people are, that's the way they are, but there's a more of a focus on let's get this contained and out of but more into control and that kind of stuff, versus high sensitivity is what I try to help people see is that it's not about how can I be less sensitive, or how can I make this not a factor in my life, and shift that to this is the ways that this is absolutely amazing. How can I use this going forward? Recognizing where all are all of these things that actually help me and help other people. Oh yeah, that's because of my sensitivity. And so when other people go, how did you even know to do that? Or how did you recognize that? Or that's amazing that you thought ahead to do whatever. And for you, it's oh, I don't know what, and sometimes you're thinking, why wouldn't you? why don't you do that? And that's part of that communication thing, is that having those expectations of, okay, I'm this way, someone else isn't going to see it the same way, so I can't have those same expectations for everyone, but also recognizing what their expectations are of you, because you each come from your own, look through your own lens, and yeah, so.